Hey, it's been a while, eh? I recently played the Little Nightmare games over on my Twitch, and since the games leave a lot of their story open for interpretation, we decided to watch Super Horror Bros Little Nightmares timeline video to try and understand the story a little bit better. Also, if you are interested, edited versions of my playthroughs are on my main channel, linked below. Let's get into it. Let's look at this one, the complete Little Nightmares timeline explained by Super Horror Bro. Because I'm very curious about the story, because I think the games are really cool and I like the mystery that they have, that they don't explain everything to you. I enjoy that about horror games, when they leave you a bit in the dark, when you get some clues, and if you look really at the details you can figure out the story, but it doesn't give it to you on the surface. Now you have to dig to really get the story. So I'm curious what other people came up with, because mine is very lackluster, my timeline.
Hey guys, Super Horror Bro Mike here, and in this video we take a step back
I hope
and
the
look
sound
at the
is
big
okay and it's not
picture
too
as we
loud.
attempt to set a timeline to the entire Little Nightmares universe. There have been 3 games in total, Little Nightmares and its DLC, Secrets of Amor, the mobile spin-off, Very Little Nightmares,
okay,
and
I didn't know about that
sequel,
one.
Little Nightmares 2.
I didn't know there
All of
was
these
a
games
mobile
are
game.
connected, but how? Well, sit back, relax, and get ready for a guide through the events of these games in the order that makes most sense, at least to my mind. In addition to nailing down a rough
In
time,
my opinion, it's second game, so I don't think it's an opinion, I think it's very obvious just from playing the game. It's second game, then DLC, and then the first game. I'm looking forward to see when the third game will play. From what I heard on TikTok comments, it's supposed to be after the first game, so it would be the last in the timeline. But I don't know if that is confirmed yet. But it would make sense, because all the games so far have explored Six's story. So it would make sense if Six is a returning character in the third game, although now I know we play 2 other characters, so Six might be, now that she's gone evil and ate the mother lady, whatever she's called, and consumed her power and then consumed all the people on board, that she maybe is now the main antagonist in the third game and that she's going to be the final boss you have to defeat. Mono is trapped in his own little time loop thing where he tries to stop Six or where he tries to free Six and then gets trapped there and then tries to stop his earlier self from teaming up with Six. Hey, yeah, the story is a bit complex. It's I'm not quite sure what the story, what the exact story is, but that is what I got from it. I got that Mono is trapped in his own time loop. Six became evil because she ate the mother and has now her power to consume people. And in the third game, we are going to play 2 people you saw in the trailer that will probably, in my opinion, fight Six at the end, because Six is now gone evil. That is my headcanon so far. But maybe this theory has some more input, because I didn't know there was a mobile game, and apparently it's important.
This video will aim to contextualize various elements using theories that seem most logical. With all of that said, let us begin at the very start of this nightmarish tale, with the origin story found within Very Little Nightmares.
Okay, because I don't know anything about that, and apparently Six is also
Released
in it.
as a mobile offshoot back in 2019, Very Little Nightmares was a touchscreen puzzle game with a very different art style. It used hand-drawn visuals to tell the story of a character which at first glance appeared to be our heroine Six. Using this familiar character, players explored an old mansion built atop a tall cliff face in the middle of the ocean, a place known as the Nest. It is eventually revealed that
I have to say, all the locations in the game are always so interesting. The restaurant boat, the city where we were in the second game, the abandoned city with the people that were entranced by the TV, and especially the tower where we were at the end, where with the low gravity and the portal doors. That area was so cool. I really enjoyed that area.
This character is not Six. Her name is simply the girl in the yellow raincoat.
Okay.
A raincoat she eventually loses as she plummets to her death while being chased by a monstrous child known as the Pretender.
Okay.
We can clearly see from her haircut that this girl is
I
not
didn't even knew
Six.
that
However, Six does feature throughout
opponents,
the game.
The enemies
A
all have
fellow prisoner
official names. Like this one is called the Pretender. I'm curious if the other people also have like real names. I know the two cooks were called cooks because that is what the achievement called them. Yeah, the thing of Six and the loop. Yeah, there's some kind of weird time loop going on. That's what I got. Especially Mono seems to be trapped in it, where his future self is trying to stop his younger self, which I thought was also a cool twist. I think most of these games had cool twists at the end. Like Six suddenly going berserk, Mono being trapped in a time loop, here the new kid in the DLC becoming the mushroom that Six eats. They all have these twists at the end that I don't see coming.
who ends up fleeing the nest alongside the girl.
Apparently even the mobile game, because when you think it's Six the entire time and suddenly she plummets to her death, that is also a twist that you don't see coming.
Yellow raincoat and escaping on a raft after her companion met a watery grave. Before the events of Little Nightmares 2, I had assumed Six acquired her iconic yellow raincoat after leaving the shore of the nest aboard her raft and scooping it out of the water, then being picked up by the mysterious boatman character and taken to the moor, or perhaps...
Okay. There are a lot more characters, apparently. Because the boatman did not was not a character in the games. I don't know if that was maybe a comic or if this is just the sequences in the mobile game are made like a comic, but that character's also new.
Simply washing up beside it and finding her way inside. This speculation is now proven incorrect. How do we know Little Nightmares 2 takes place in the weeks and months after the story of Very Little Nightmares? Well, there are several reasons to make this connection. If we look at the digital comics, which acts as a precursor to the events of the sequel,
but it
we
also
see
makes
Six
sense
without rain
because she gets a raincoat in the city and is not yet the evil monster that can consume people. So it has to be before Little Nightmares 1 because she has not her raincoat and she's not evil yet.
Raincoat and looking as if she just stepped off the raft at the end of the mobile game. She is captured by the Hunter, a haunting sight that her would-be companion Mono witnesses and seemingly the reason he sets off to free Six at the beginning of Little Nightmares 2. When we finally discover Six, there are several key points of interest found within her prison
Mono, by
room.
the way, also just
First of all,
everyone.
the music box, an item comforting her
evil.
during her imprisonment. We see a representation of this music box at the end of the game, Monster Six holding it with extreme importance. In fact, the Signal Tower uses this box to corrupt and bind her to its spell. Although referenced in the first Little Nightmares game, this scene in Little Nightmares 2 seems to be Six's first introduction to the item and the reason for its hold over her. She connected with it as a coping mechanism during a time of great emotional trauma in her childhood. Also look to the chalk.
That makes sense, that she was captured by the Hunter and connected with the music box in captivity, because I didn't know where the music box came from when we found her in the tower. I knew the music box was important, but I didn't know it has any story relevance. I thought it was just the item that caught her attention when she was trapped there. But right, she was playing with one earlier in the game. I completely forgot that.
Sketches on the walls, presumably the work of Six while being held here. The tally marks are easy enough to explain. They signify a passing of time, maybe days, weeks, or months. Six has, after all, been here for a while. We also see Six has drawn an image of the Signal Tower. This drawing is almost an exact match for those scenes sketched by the bullies within the schoolhouse. To me, this suggests the signal tower has already began calling to Six and hypnotizing her with its corrupt transmission, much as we see with the other wretched creatures of this world. In fact,
Okay, I didn't even notice that so I noticed the signal tower and that the people were watching it, but I didn't put that much importance on the tower itself, that is the thing that corrupts the people.
later in the game, as the two adventurers pass by the tower, Six stares up at it as if under a spell. This may well be why she was so easily manipulated, distorted and corrupted while held prisoner within. The tower already held sway over her mental state. But most interesting of all, the sketches are for people we have seen before. People with their faces scratched out, as if to suggest they are now dead. The sketch on the far right represents a person falling. Remember back to the final moments of Very Little Nightmares, the girl in the yellow raincoat who fell to her death at the hands of the Pretender. It seems this sketch represents her. But then what about the others? Well, for now we must move on. But don't worry, we'll be back to revisit these sketches at the end.
Okay, let me think about it. We have the girl falling. Then there's nothing behind the question mark except the days that passed. There's a mushroom person, someone holding the hand. So Six already has to know about the mushroom people here. If the whole thing is a time loop, maybe that is herself with the mushroom people holding the hands, because she also hugged some of them and became friends with them before she ate one. So this might be her in the future. Or maybe this is the kid we played in the DLC, because that kid actually became friends with all the mushroom people and helped them. This game is really wild. Yeah, it's a wild story. The whole time loop thing, and everyone gets corrupted by something, and that all the people are changed is very interesting. That was one thing that I really stuck with me from the second game, is all the clothing you found everywhere. There were some shops you walked in, like there was a bar near the entrance of the city where you walk through, and on all the chairs are just clothes. Like the people that were sitting there just vanished while they were there. And that was something that really piqued my interest, and that the entire city was warped and distorted. But apparently that's the signal tower which does all that, which makes sense, because inside the signal tower everything was completely distorted. Like Six was completely mutated, there was no gravity, rooms connected weirdly through portals and everything, so it makes sense that the signal tower has some kind of reality bending power. That makes sense when you look at the inside
of this video. You may be asking, what about the yellow raincoat? Why did Six not have this key item if this game follows on directly from the events of Very Little Nightmares? This is actually fairly easy to speculate on.
I wonder if we will ever see how the raincoat got to that point, because someone would have found it and carried it in the middle of the city. So maybe we will get like a DLC maybe someday where we play the character that found the raincoat and carried it up to that point. Or maybe that will forever be a mystery how the raincoat ended up there.
The main point to bear in mind is that while we see Six about to leave the shore of the nest aboard the driftwood raft, we never see her collect up the floating raincoat.
Yes.
It is therefore logical to conclude this raincoat took the same tide as Six and washed up ashore near the Pale City. However, unlike Six, it was not collected up by the hunter, but rather a denizen of the city itself.
Okay.
Eventually, its wearer was either taken by the signal tower, once again leaving the coat behind, or it was simply discarded. After all, these city streets are full of discarded junk at every turn.
Like the art style.
This is why Six finds it far from shore, yet looks on it as if it holds some connection to her previously, reminding her of the child who helped her escape not too long ago. One more thing that really connects Six to the events of Very Little Nightmares preceding this game can be seen by her uncomfortable demeanour while riding the floating door across the river mouth here. It makes sense when we remember she had recently escaped a traumatic experience within the nest using the exact same means. An escape.
Okay, I thought that it was just very uncomfortable to ride on a piece of driftwood over the ocean. That was my theory at the time, but that makes also sense.
Method which led to her capture by the hunter. Skipping to the end of the adventure, Six is taken by Thin Man and imprisoned once again, this time within the walls of the signal tower itself.
Thin Man.
Here, its distorted signal twists and corrupts Six in ways all too familiar to anyone who has encountered monsters such as Roger the Janitor. The signal tower
His name is Roger? His name is Roger? I love that. I thought all of these characters had just these weird names like Six, Mono, the Long Man or Lanky Man or whatever he was called, the Cooks, but no, his name is Roger. He's like the one guy with a normal name. I love that. That's great.
Uses Thin Man's power to warp and distort reality, which ravages the world and does exactly the same to poor Six.
Wait, so... Wait, let me hear that again.
The signal tower uses Thin Man's power to warp and distort reality, which ravages the world and does exactly...
Oh, so the tower itself doesn't have the power, but it comes from the Long Man or Mono in this case? That makes sense, because it is very... the power we see Mono use when he fights the Long Man in the streets. Also, Mono, just insanely powerful. He can just distort and warp time and space. Kind of insane. That is something that I was impressed by when we played the game, but I also was being haunted by some weird monster, so I didn't pay too much attention to it. But that's kind of insane that that is his ability. That there are people who have random abilities and this kid can just warp time and space to his will. That's kind of insane.
The same to poor Six. More importantly, it pulls from her memories to create a prison for her. While examining the items found within this room, many look eerily familiar. Again, we will revisit this concept at the end of this video. Mono eventually manages to cure Six by destroying the music box, an item, as stated before, which binds her to this monstrous form. This leads to the signal tower revealing its true form, a living mass of flesh made up from the bodies of those it consumes. While escaping, Mono drops behind Six and she grabs his hand to prevent him falling, but decides in a cruel turn of events to let her friend fall.
Six senses Mono's great power and inner darkness, and darkness the signal tower is quick to exploit. So Six does not betray us. I thought Six betrays us because she kind of figured out that we are the Lanky Man and kind of thinks we are dangerous and puts the blame on us, but she actually feels the power and the darkness in him. That's interesting. That makes sense. That took a bit of her evil away. Because I thought she at first I thought she only turns evil once she consumes people on the maw or whatever it's called. But then I saw this and I was like, okay, maybe she was always evil. But no, that makes sense when she feels that Mono is just being with the power to distort reality and feels that he has darkness in him. Kind of a good call to maybe try to get rid of him. Didn't work out, but I see where she's coming from.
It's likely because she senses the darkness calling him from within, and has witnessed Mono's dangerous powers, which she feels threatened by. Of course, Six unwittingly dooms the world by doing this. Mono is imprisoned by the signal tower, and his powers used to distort and warp the world throughout space and time. This creates a time paradox where Mono has always been Thin Man and so calls out to his past self so he may be freed from this prison within the tower and finally have a chance to break the cycle, saving the world and its inhabitants from this terrible fate. Six leaves the signal.
That is kind of crazy because that time loops are such a weird concept to get your head around. Because there had to be a point where the tower for the first time gets a hold of Mono without Six. Because Six only lets him fall in the time loop. So at some point the radio tower would have to get hold of him before the whole world was distorted, so it could then use them to distort the whole world. Time loops are wild. When you think too much about them, they often fall apart. But I always think time loops are a very interesting thing if you use them correctly. I think these games use them very good because they don't explore them too much and don't try to explain them too much. They just say, yes, they are here and this is what they do. Because when you go too much into detail, they often don't make that much sense. So it's best to just not try to explain them.
Signal tower, but part of her now belongs to it. As seen with the glitching remains of the ghost children we find throughout Little Nightmares 2, her connection to Mono and the tower separates Six's soul from her body. Now incomplete, the loss of Six's soul leaves a great empty void, a void which must be satisfied. This is the birth of Six's hunger, a hunger we contend with throughout the very first Little Nightmares game, confirming Little Nightmares 2 is indeed the second game in the timeline and a prequel to the events of the original. We also note that Six's spirit energy looks down at a poster of the Maw, suggesting the TV6 exits the tower through is either aboard the Maw or she is given the idea to head there in order to gain access to the power she needs to be cured.
Okay, maybe I
powers
just
she eventually procures from Sorceress the Lady.
Cutscene.
With this information in hand, the first game is pretty self-explanatory. It is the third in the timeline, continuing Six's story as her hunger begins to destroy her from within. The ending of Little Nightmares 2 also sheds light on a possible explanation for the shadowy figure of Six that watches over her each time she feasts.
I didn't notice them. They were there the entire time when we were eating? Okay, good to know.
This is the half of her lost after escaping the signal tower. This hunger requires soul energy to properly quench its thirst, replacing elements of the soul Six herself has lost. This explains why, in a cruel twist of fate, Six eats the gnome child and not the sausage it offers up to her. It also explains why, upon killing the lady and consuming her dark magic, Six then uses said power to drain the life force from everyone else aboard the Maw. She has become a monster herself, a monster with a never-ending hunger, sucking the life from anything that stands in her way.
Yep.
So, let's tie up some loose ends.
That's why I think in the third game, Six will be the final boss, where you have to defeat her, that probably plays in the future where she has become more powerful and consumed a lot of people, and you have to defeat her, and the way you defeat her maybe restarts the time loop. Or maybe they don't want to make it too obvious that's a time loop, and they just defeat Six at the end and that's it. But I guess that is where this, maybe even the game will even end where in the map where the mobile game is. That the game ends on top of this mountain in this manner, and you defeat Six and the time loop just starts from there then. That she basically falls exactly where she first shows up in the mobile game.
Ends and wrap up this video. Returning to Six's chalk drawings in the hunter's house, and things suddenly click. Starting at the signal tower and working backwards reveals our timeline. It shows past and future, but not yet present. To explain, look to the far right, and we see events as they happen before Little Nightmares 2, the death of the girl in the yellow raincoat as she plunged to a watery grave. Then we see tally marks representing a passage of time. These lead to an empty gap. But why is this empty? Well, because it marks the current period of time for which the outcome is not yet determined. But perhaps this could be filled in with Mono, like so. Moving on, we see another passing of time and then a drawing of the runaway boy and his gnome. This was the character found in the DLC Secrets of the Maw, which ran in sync with the events of Six's adventure in the original game.
Yeah.
Another character who died by Six's hand as seen earlier in the video.
That's what I earlier said.
Finally, another shorter passage of time and the death of the lady. This brings us bang up to date with the story of Little Nightmares as we know it, and everything ties in to that image at the back of this room, the signal tower.
I mean, there are tally marks between the gnome person and this person, so there's a passage of time, so this could also be for the next game, a person that dies there, not necessarily the lady, because this death and her death happen basically at the same time, like 10 minutes apart. So if this means there was time in between, that this is maybe someone else's death that we will find out in the third game
itself. What's interesting about the placement of the signal tower drawing is how it's sketched upon a different wall surface. To me, this makes sense as the signal tower exists on a separate plane of existence within time and space, a dimension where time is fluid and past, present and future are as one. This explains why we see items from Six's past and future within this same room. Take for example her suitcase from the Maw. It doesn't exist in her memories as of the story of Little Nightmares 2, but can still appear in her prison within the tower due to its ability to draw from events still to occur. Look to these portraits for example, and again we see a timeline represented right to left. At the far right, we see Six as a child, cowering in her raincoat. Then, in the center, an image representing the lady, her face scratched away to represent her demise. On the left, we see a horrifying face, but one that seems familiar in a way. It looks similar to that of a granny found in the depths of a Maw. I had theorized previously that this granny is what would eventually become of the lady as her powers ravaged her body over time. The pretender from Very Little Nightmares, the next in line to take the lady's place after she herself took the place of the previous granny.
Okay, so that is the time loop of the lady. She is the pretender, falls down, survives, ends up on the Maw, becomes the lady, gets corrupted by her power and then turns into this old thing, fish that was fighting us in the lower parts of the Maw. Okay. Yeah, sure. Makes sense.
Again, it's all one big cycle. It seems as Six consumed the lady's power, she may be in for a similar fate, to become disfigured and monstrous over time. This portrait showing Six in the future. Perhaps if Little Nightmares 3 does happen, we will witness this horrifying transformation.
Okay, this video is 4 years old. We already got a trailer, it will happen.
Unless Mono finds a way to escape his Thin Man fate and break the time paradox that is. One question remains. How is Six able to draw from memories of her future? Memories she shouldn't yet have access to.
If it's a time loop,
well, if we think about the names Six and Mono
her
and what they represent in literal terms, we can jump to some logical conclusions. Mono means one, only, or single.
Yes.
This makes sense as the origin of this terrifying world falls to Mono and his fate as Thin Man within the Signal Tower. There is only one Mono, and he is the ground zero event which triggers everything before and after. While running toward the door Thin Man is trapped behind, if we pay close attention, we can see the number 6.
What?
This behind, if we pay close attention.
Okay, yeah, I guess. Can see it barely.
We can see the number 6.
I don't know who found
this suggests
that, but
this
yeah,
door
sure.
is number 6, and therefore the 6th cycle within this
okay,
paradox.
If
so, then 6 has her name due to being the catalyst for this particular cycle. She triggers the events that doom this world each time when handing over Mono to the Signal Tower's control. If this theory is correct, then 6 is simply the 6th of her kind, with 5 prior versions existing in different failed timelines. So, with this concept in mind, we can conclude 6 may retain faint memories of her 5 prior incarnations. Of course, this is a stretch, but it is the only way the rest of this theory makes sense, and why else feature the number 6 on the door here, and use such numerical terms for both protagonists. Either way, that head-scratching conundrum brings us to the end of this video looking at the timeline of the Little Nightmares universe. I hope you did enjoy it, and if you did, remember to leave a like, comment down below, and of course—
I agree with a lot of it. Some of the things I didn't catch on myself. Like, I would have never seen the 6 on the door while playing myself. But yeah, a lot of it I got by playing the games, but making the connections, especially with the help of the mobile game, makes sense. This is very close to what I had in mind about the story. So I'm very interested where the story goes next. I think the theory that 6 will be because this is the story of 6. She's in the mobile game, she's in the second game, she's in the first game, she will be in the third game probably. So we will either find a way to break the loop at the end, or maybe restart the loop just. And this world is forever doomed in this loop and it can't be broken. That's also a possibility. Which would be the darkest possibility, but it would be one. Yeah, that was very interesting. I have to say, I really enjoy these games.